You're about to listen to a conversation with Robbie Rogers and Colin Martin as part of MLS WORKS Soccer for All speaker series. Before Raiders defensive lineman Carl Nassib came out as gay, Robbie and Colin were only 2 of 4 players who were or are out and active professionals in North America's major male sports leagues. That number, I am happy to say, is now 5. But there is so much more work to do to make everyone feel supported, loved, and able to live as their true selves. A warning, you will hear some adult language in this interview. I hope you'll also learn something and start conversations in your own life that help change this world for the better. Without further ado, Robbie and Colin. First of all, welcome and thank you guys for being a part of MLS WORKS' Soccer for All speaker series. I think I can speak for Charlie when I say we're proud to be here today to have this conversation. More importantly, to listen to what you both have to say. Robbie, Colin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure.
So I want to start with something in the news over the last year, and I thought it was one of the more incredible weeks in professional sports history that I've ever seen. Last year, Colin, your San Diego Loyal forfeited back-to-back matches in the heat of a playoff race, one after a player was revealed to have been racially abused, and then in the final game of the season, against one of the league's top teams you're competing with, the Loyal just walked off the field in protest after a Phoenix Rising player directed a homophobic slur at you, Colin. It was a game San Diego was leading 3-1. It was a result you needed to have any chance of keeping your trophy dreams alive. In my mind, it was unprecedented. I don't remember anything like it. It was principled. It was sacrifice. I'm curious from both your perspectives. Colin, from you living it, and Robbie, you on the outside looking in, how did you experience that moment and everything that's followed? And Colin, I think we can start with you. Like, as you reflect now, does it seem incredible? Does it seem just like what should have happened? I mean, in some ways, both of those are so true.
Yeah, I think first off, let me start with that. I think we wouldn't have walked off the field if what happened the week before with my teammate Elijah, him being called the N-word, if that didn't happen. Because of that, like that week following, we just like, as a team, we really came together and we're just basically like, hey, in the future, if this happens, we need to do something. First of all, we need to acknowledge it. So Elijah or teammates that heard the word, like we need to know about it so that we can like back our teammates up. But then we also need to do something about it. So I think that whole week leading up to the Phoenix game, we wore shirts before the game. Before the game, we came together as a team to acknowledge what happened. At halftime, we were going to do something with Phoenix where we were going to stand together and acknowledge what was said. And so I think all that leading up kind of led to the team being on the same page for when basically what happened to me. I mean, I had a slur used against me, and all I did was tell the ref what happened, and he didn't quite know what to do with it. And he actually thought, I mean, I don't know if you guys remember this, but he thought I called him gay. Yep. While I was trying to like explain what happened to me. Yeah, like he sent me off. And then obviously my teammates came to him, was like, no, like he's gay. What's going on here? And yeah, so I mean, it's all pretty surreal, but I think because the group was so together and cohesive, their decision to walk off once they knew what happened, once they knew what the coach said to Landon, it was clear that they were ready to make a stand and just support me and walk off the field.
Robbie, how much did you pay attention at the time when all this was going on?
It was kind of impossible to not pay attention to it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about it and reading about it, and it's so interesting to hear the backstory. It's interesting to hear about what happened the week before, although I did read a little bit about that. It's unfortunate that teams have to, come together and discuss these kind of things, but I guess that's the world that we've been living in for a long time. And I think like enough is enough at some point in sports when you're dealing with racism, sexism, and homophobia. But just as an outsider, with Greg, I was talking to my husband, I was just really proud of the way Colin and his team handled it. And even, I'm such a big fan of Landon, even though he's such a weirdo. He was a huge support system in my life, and he's an incredible player and even a better person. So I was very proud of the way they handled it. And it's interesting to hear, I feel like all teams now need to, they can't just focus on the sport. They need to have this kind of internal, code of whatever it is. It's like this, what's going to happen if this happens, or what, who are we as people, and what does this team represent? So, it's interesting to hear that. I think all teams need to kind of take that approach to their entire season. So,
Colin, I know you spoke about it before. If something happens like this, we're going to come together. We're going to make a stance. But were you surprised at all that when it really came down to the moment that you had to stand up, considering you're not going to make the playoffs, you're basically thrown in the towel for the rest of the season to get your point across? Were you surprised by Landon coming to your side, your teammates, the fans?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it can't be understated how much of an impact Landon had in the moment, because he was pretty adamant that he didn't want to play the game. So when your leader in the locker room is saying basically, hey, I don't want us to continue to play this game, it's a big deal. And I think my teammates heard that, and they heard what the coach had said, and they wanted to support me. I also think it's important that I am out, like if I would have in that moment said that this is something that hurt me and I wasn't gay, maybe my teammates wouldn't care as much. They would be like, okay, that's tough, but we all get called some things that we don't want to be called on the field, and let's continue to play. But because they knew me and we've started to build this relationship, they weren't having that, and they felt like this was a moment where they could really stick up for their teammate. Because the week before, we felt like we let down our teammate Elijah because we didn't know all the information, and we weren't able to support him in the moment. And I think so he gets called the N-word, if I can remember right, around the 76th minute. And I think because he's so worked up by it, in the 82nd or something, he gets his second yellow and gets sent off. So if we maybe support him, first of all, we just support him as a teammate before anything that happens on the field. Clearly that's more important. But maybe he doesn't get sent off, and we can just support him. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe if something different happens, I punch Flemings in the face and then I get a red card, and our season's put in jeopardy because of that. But
can I ask how much of this you guys have had to deal with over the course of your lives as soccer players? Like on the field, was this something like this? Can't have been. This is not the first time, right? Like how much over the course of your years, how did you deal with it? How much did it affect you?
You can go ahead, Robbie, if you want.
I think that's the thing that stopped me from coming out much earlier. It was different before I came out to after. After the only time I was called, I think it was like a queer or something, it was much more directed at me, and they knew what they were doing. When I was younger, from the age of 5 till I was 23, conversations or being in the locker room or being on a field and hearing faggot or this or that, it was not necessarily, people didn't know who I was. So it was much more internal. It was something that kind of chipped at me every day. It's something that you kind of deal with by yourself. So it's definitely something that affected me my whole life. And even after I came out, it's like years of therapy dealing with all that stuff. But after I came out, actually, I had less of it. I think people, once they're aware of who you are, and they become more sensitive to like what makes you different. And I think that's in a lot of different aspects of life.
I would wonder what you guys would say about the culture of sport especially I think on the male side, because I know I was in locker rooms, not being at the levels you guys have played at and thrived at, but I know I was in locker rooms. I know I was in schools. I know I was in places where that was said, and it was said quite a bit. And I could admit to saying, and I can remember the time when I realized, oh my God, look at this connection that there is. Look at the way that this hurts people. Look what this really means. And it was a moment of deep shame for me, but that doesn't erase all those moments for kids and for adults out there. Is there something, what is it about the culture of sports on the male side, or maybe our culture in general? Like, what is broken in your guys' minds?
Before I touch on that, I think going back to your last question, for me, it was really tough growing up when my best friends on my teams were using that language. And then there was like a spark in me that I think was around high school when I realized, they don't really mean that. Like that these words are just meant to put people down, and they don't necessarily hate gay people. So that was like a big step for me to like put those two and two together. It doesn't make it easier, and it doesn't make those words being said any less hurtful. But I had to finally tell myself, oh, like just because they're saying that doesn't mean like they really, I don't know, don't like gay people. So I don't know. That was a big step for me. But yeah, I don't know. Just want to say that.
I was curious too. When you're in the locker room, is it the fear of your teammates when you kind of announce that you're coming out, or is it more the fans? Because I feel like, you know, Robbie, I've shared a locker room with you since we were 17, and you know, I always thought that everyone loved you. You're always like, you know, the smiling, fun, you know, teammate. That no matter what, and I'm sure you realized after, had you come out back then, we all have been like, you're our guy. Like, that's not going to change anything. We're still going to ride or die with you. But was it more the fear of the fans and that perception every time you go to a venue that you're going to start hearing these slurs?
You know, I think it's different for everybody. You know, I think we should all like always remember not to kind of put someone's coming out experience, you know, it's what might be true for one person might not be true for all of us. So for me, it was definitely being in the locker room with guys that I felt like although it wasn't true, obviously, you know, you guys were very supportive after I came out. To go back to like, you know, there's years and years and years of hearing like, oh, that's gay, or there's like just little tiny things like that slowly just chip away at you, especially when you're a young kid until, you know, a young teenager, and all the guys in your team you think are straight, and all of them behave a certain way. And so you're trying to behave that way. And so like, just for so many years of hearing these little homophobic things, even if, like Colin said, you realize after you come out, you realize your teammates actually would be supportive, that they would love you, that they're not homophobic, but it's that culture. It's just like that. There's like you know, the footballer stereotype that we all try to live up to. And that is not gay. That is, you know, it's something else. It's very masculine. It's you know, it's whatever Cristiano Ronaldo is. But, you know, for me, Charlie, I think it was definitely the locker room and feeling like I would be so different from all of you guys, and all of you guys that were my brothers. You know, I think of all the time we spent together, and I just thought, and also it was my internal homophobia growing up in a Catholic conservative family. And so there was a lot of different elements to my experience. But, you know, I've learned now that you guys would be supportive, but at the time I was, you know, worried that I wouldn't have that same support, and that I wouldn't be accepted in the locker room, and that, you know, if I told you guys and then we went in the shower, that people would, you know, be making fun of me, or they just walk out of the shower. You know, there was like all those fears that play in your head that you probably, you know, in small ways, they build in your head, and you kind of create a narrative, and, you know, that's maybe not totally true, but it is based off of years and years of hearing just so many homophobic comments, you know, nonstop in the locker room and on the field. And, you know, so my biggest fear was just you guys, was that we wouldn't have the same relationship. The fans, you know, they do whatever they can to kind of get under our skin, and it's unfortunate when they say stupid things, but I didn't necessarily ever care about that kind of stuff.
I totally agree. For me, it was always my teammates. The fans, like that was the last thing I had to think about when I was coming out publicly. And you just don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, or you don't like, and you hate that even would be a case, you know, like, cause it isn't an issue. But when you're closeted, you think, oh, you don't want to make people uncomfortable. You don't want to make your teammates uncomfortable. You don't want to feel different. Cause like all I felt in the DC locker room when I was a young kid, I thought I was just like anyone else, you know. But I knew if I came out at the time, for me, there was a barrier. I thought like I was going to make people uncomfortable. It was going to be a big deal, and I wasn't ready to do it. But I will say, I don't know if you've heard this, Robbie, but when you did come out, and it was going around the locker room, hearing people say positive things about you meant the world to me. Like when they said, oh, like, and they just cared about you as a teammate, and whether it was people that played with you in Columbus, and they just said, you know, they talked about you as a player and as a person, and nothing to do with your sexuality. Like, to me, that's all I needed to hear, and it gave me extreme confidence. But on the other side, when Michael Sam came out and it was on SportsCenter, and my teammates said, oh, why do we have to see this? This is so stupid. Like why does he have to come out? I was like, damn, like, why do you guys care? Like, it's a big deal for him. It's a big deal for football. It's a big deal for our country. Like, why do you have such an adverse like reaction to this guy coming out and living openly, you know? So I like on one end, I'd be like, wow, they can just see Robbie as like an amazing teammate, player, person, but then they just like can't stand like a Michael Sam coming out and they think it's for attention or they think it's for whatever. And so it would just be like one good like stepping stone and then one like, you know, I don't really want to come out this today. Like that's the furthest thing away from my mind. But so
what for each of you was the moment where you said, okay, I'm going to do this? And how did you arrive at that conclusion? What made the time right? What made it for you feel, I don't know if safe is the right word. It might not be the right word.
I think Colin had a much different experience. You know, I think he was much more courageous and he was still playing when he, you know, kind of made this decision and stuck to it. I, on the other hand, I was living in England and, you know, had fulfilled a lot of different aspirations in my life when it came to football. You know, I went to Olympics with Charlie and played professionally, played for the national team, all that stuff. And I was just so depressed. I remember winning a championship with Columbus in LA and like going home to my parents' house and just sitting there and be like, why am I not happy? You know, what am I like, when am I ever going to be happy? Is this success as a soccer player ever going to fulfill this like need for self-love? And I realized when I was in England that it wouldn't, and that I need to make a decision. And so I decided that I was going to come out and stop playing because, again, the number of things that I'd heard growing up in changing rooms in the United States and Holland and England, like it really just scared the shit out of me. So I was like, I'm not going to put myself through this. So it really, for me at least, was kind of a self-realization that like nothing is going to make me happy outside of myself and that I have to kind of be in charge of that. And then it wasn't until after I had, you know, incredible support from people like Charlie and Sasha and Bruce and all these different people that I decided that actually I could go back. So I think, you know, it was very different than Colin's experience.
That's cool to hear, Robbie, and hard at the same time. But I think the one thing I really admired about you is that you did have such a good career, you know, and that does matter, you know. It shouldn't, but it does. And I think that was the one thing that was like holding me back from coming out earlier. Is I didn't want to come out until I was like an all-star or playing 30 games a year, and it just didn't happen. And eventually I got to the point in Minnesota where I was like, you know, that's not how I'm going to value myself as a person and as a player. And you're just not going to, you haven't played 30 games, so come out. You know, who cares about that? But I just had so much support from my teammates, from my family, and from my friends, and I really didn't want to feel the regret of not coming out while I was playing. And I think it all just bubbled up to the point where I felt like it would be disingenuous and I couldn't walk around and I couldn't play like if I wasn't out. And yeah, you have something to say, Charlie? Sorry.
Yeah. You know, listening to your story and seeing Robbie, you were kind of like, I'm over this. You kind of get empowered. You come back to the game, you win an MLS Cup, you beat us in the finals. And don't remind me about that. Colin, same thing for you. You come out, there's all this support. Why do you think there hasn't been more players to come out and say, man, I've seen the reception that you've got from your teammates, from the fans, from your coaches. Why do you think that stereotype is still holding people back from enjoying life and being who they are?
I can tell you from what I've heard from players is just they've not lived our experience. They don't know, you know, unless you have that actual support, you've had that like firsthand experience from your teammates. I can tell them what it's going to be like, but they still hold on to that fear that they're not going to be accepted, that, you know, the changing room will be different for them. Some of them do fear the fans a little bit, not like in a massive way, but I think it's until you've like kind of walked that walk, I don't think you quite believe it, you know, especially when you grow up your whole life thinking that what you are is, you know, there's something wrong with you. So there's a lot of different elements to this. And obviously the changing room is a huge part of it. The culture is a huge part of it, but there's also other elements with family and just society in general. So, it's hard to tell someone that like, you're going to be accepted and you're going to do this, or it's hard to persuade anyone of those kind of things. And, until there's more of us, then I think, then they'll finally believe it.
Yeah. I think Robbie's spot on. I mean, personally, I've tried to, highlight my privilege in all of this, like I've been extremely lucky and privileged along this journey to be supported through all those different phases of my life. And I think, like Robbie said, like if one of those phases doesn't go right, whether it's maybe your family or your friends or an agent or someone at the club, all it takes is one person to give you a really negative experience or make you feel like you shouldn't come out, or make you feel like being gay is the worst thing ever. And it can deter you, So, like I say, it could be an agent, could be, you look abroad and you see these clubs in Spain that like you hear these stories of how like the sponsorships in the club hierarchy just won't allow a player to come out. Like hearing that, like if I was in Spain, could I come out while I was playing for a club that just straight up would not allow a player to come out? Like, no, I wouldn't be coming out. Religiously, it was hard for me, like growing up in the church, so there's all these different things you have to kind of go through to be able to accept yourself, or just walk away from that hate and be like, or like discrimination and be like, I'm leaving that stuff aside and I'm just going to step forward. So, a lot of things have to align for you to be able to be out and I don't know, especially playing professional sports, I think still, but we're getting there.
I think that's my question about the culture is, and like locker room culture and how we eliminate that, because it is endemic. It is there. And guys are dealing with that. And I look at the other side of the game, and not the other side of the game, but the women's game has so many sort of out and it's just like there's a critical mass there. There are examples you can follow. There are people at the very top of the game in mainstream society who are writing books and on TV and being loud and saying, this is who I am. We haven't got that on the male side. Is there a way to address, to fix it? And I'm not talking about the pro level even, though maybe I am. I'm thinking more in terms of the beginnings of life. You, Robbie, you talk about those early days of playing and hearing that. I remember all that. I remember what those places felt like. And they definitely did not feel safe for anybody who was sitting there thinking, I'm gay, what do I do? Like, what do you think? What do you guys think about addressing that at an earlier age, and how can we do it?
I have a question for you, Rob. Do you think there are a ton of out gay professionals or gay professionals that aren't out?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah. Like, do you think there are?
Yeah, there's a few. I don't know if there's a lot. There's a few
different levels, right? Like of the game, it could be, because I don't know. I feel like there is a problem.
Footballers that are closeted. Better than I was. Much better.
I think there is an issue, like at the youth level. Like I feel like the only way I can make sense of it, if you compare it to the women's game, is that like the amount of would-be gay soccer players at the highest level are just not have left the game for whatever reason, whether it's homophobia or whatever. And then there's just less of a chance that they are to make it professional. Whereas in the women's game, they feel comfortable in their teams. They feel comfortable in evolving as a person. Therefore, there's a higher chance for them to be professional. I don't know. Do you think that makes sense, Robbie, or like?
Yeah, no, I Leeds is doing something right now. I think it's smart for all these academies to have like the proper education. I think it's, we talk about, changing the culture. First off, like there's so much about a locker room culture that I absolutely love. The banter, it's a playground for men in so many fun ways, and you become brothers. So I'm not saying that like we should kill all that. It shouldn't be this like sterile, big jokes. Like no. Yeah. So I just want to preface it with like, there's still fun to be had, and there's still all of that to be had. But I think from if we can get to young footballers and soccer players, I was just in England, obviously, soccer players, and teach them about, not just homophobia, but racism and sexism and just respect for people, and about, education and trying to make them complete not just soccer players, but like just really working on with them and what kind of people they are. I think that's going to make them better at their sport. It's going to help them find whatever their passion is outside of soccer when they're done. It's going to help them make better decisions while they are professional. So I think that's really important that we have, that framework in all of our clubs, the Galaxy or wherever it is. And I think people are starting to do it. I know people are starting to do that in England. I think that is a huge factor where we can actually improve just who our professionals are and the people that represent the U.S. national team and playing in our leagues. I think that's important.
I would add, like you said, Robbie, when Bruce came out and said, I support you. Colin, like you said, Landon is a leader coming out saying, hey, we're going to stand by you. I think the leaders within the clubs, whether it be the sporting director and the head coach, but also the captain, coming out every year, if this is what it takes, every single year, whether it's preseason, and saying, this is a squad, this is a locker room that is going to be acceptive of everyone and anyone, inclusive, and we're never going to judge you. You're always going to be accepted. I think, like you said, you have leaders who make you feel comfortable and make you feel comfortable in your own skin of who you are and what you're about. I think that will make a difference. Obviously, there's going to be a number of other steps that have to take place, but I think from the core, when leaders come out and say, I stand by any of you for who you are, who you really are, and you're going to be accepted in this locker room, I think that's going to make a huge difference in the end.
Yeah. And as Colin's had Landon as a coach, I had him as a captain. So it did make a huge difference for me with the Galaxy for such a long time. So, but there needs to be more leaders like that. And I think coaches need to pick the right captains, not just a player because they're a big name, but also, really to think about that decision, because I really strongly agree with Charlie that to have a captain like that is just going to improve a team in so many different ways. It really is going to keep them together. There's always a point in the season, I think we all know, where you have a few bad games where you've 3 or 4 losses in a row and you're exhausted and you have to fly to Houston in July. And if you have a captain like that, if you have a captain like that, it's just you're always playing for each other and you bond together, because there's a point in the season where you turn it around and you have you have your wins. And so I think it's important to have those kind of leaders in the locker room.
What could we have done as a soccer culture and as a society, honestly, better when you both made that decision? It did come out. The hope is that there are more Robbie Rogers and Colin Martins who will be able to make that decision. And how do we better support them? What could we have done better? It's so often with your stories, it's the positive side, but I'm more curious about the constructive side, where we as a soccer culture and all the people that make it up can make it better.
Go ahead.
I try to focus on the positives, though. I mean, I felt like when I came out, I've been extremely supported, by the league, by my teammates. I think when we do focus on some of the negative stuff, it can be hard for the next person. I don't know. For me, I try to yes, I've acknowledged growing up the certain things that were tough. But since I've been in the league, it's been when I was in the league, it was pretty good. And because of my teammate, if my teammates were horrible to me, and there were some teammates that were still tough, but if you focus on that, then the next person isn't going to come out. I don't know. And the league has tried to do their best. And I think even when my friends come to the games and they see what's on the PA before the game and they see the inclusive messaging on the game, that stuff goes a long way. And in other leagues, that isn't happening. That type of messaging. And I'm talking about 5-6 years ago, the messaging was already there. So, we could focus on, there's still obviously a lot of stuff we can be doing, but in terms of my message and in terms of what I try to highlight, I think I try to stay more on the positive side, but I don't know. What do you think with that question, Robbie?
It's tough. I've always been a little confused, when we started talking about why aren't there more out players and And the answer is kind of like, well, they don't really know what the sport feels like because they're so closeted and it's so internal and there's so much fear. So, my experience was so positive, and I had so much support from the players and the leagues and obviously coaches and my family after I came out. So I am always like every year, like, why aren't there more? Why aren't there more? But I've stopped kind of thinking about that. I've started to think more about like the younger generation. And again, that's why I think education is so important. I find like, everyone under 30, at least here in LA, is like, they don't identify as straight. They identify as like something else. They don't identify as gay or straight. They just like identify as whatever they want to be, which is
non-binary.
It's actually pretty cool to see young people so open with a lot of different aspects in life. So I know this is going to change. I think it's like a lot of things in the United States and around the world. It's going to be spearheaded by young people that are out and playing in the academies, and then just go to college and they just are who they are. So I'm definitely optimistic about that. But it's a tough question to answer because I don't necessarily know what else the MLS can be doing or the coaches or the players could be doing, because it seems like, at least from my experience and from what I've heard, is that, people are very supportive and in a way that is for all to see. And, of course there's going to be people on like social media or fans that are negative, but that's not just with homophobia. That's with a lot of different things. So, I think we have to continue doing what we're doing, having these conversations, having pride nights, again, educating our youth, and it will happen. It will happen. It's just like these things that, like Colin said, you like take a step forward and then a step back, and 2 steps forward and another step back. So it's just going to take some time.
You mentioned the next generation, and I noticed the same as you, that there's sort of more of an openness and there's a mainstreamness. I don't remember those sorts of conversations growing up in Wichita, Kansas in the mid 90s. And you see those and you hear those. Do you think that there is a movement coming here where there are going to be more kids that just feel comfortable or just are who they are from an earlier age, where society is going to have to figure out how to navigate these moments sort of on the fly? Is there a critical mass coming?
Yeah, I think you're already seeing it. Yeah, I think it's incredible to see younger people like coming out at younger ages and being supported by their classmates. And I was at my high school this off season, and I was working out at the track, and I ran into one of my old teachers, and he said that our school, the homecoming king and queen, were both queer. And like, it wasn't like, okay. And 4 years ago, they jokingly put the homecoming king as like, I think they were transgender, and that was like a joke, and it was awful. But 4 years later, the two people that are the homecoming king and queen are queer, and that's because they're just the two dopest people in the school, and people just love them. And like, we're seeing like a crazy change over like in the past 5-7 years. I think that like is incredible. But I think, touching on the last point that Robbie made, I think it's really important the work that coaches in the youth side of the game is doing, and I feel like that's the biggest place that we can see improvement. And I think that like the coaches have such a big role in like making sure that like language is inclusive and on teams, and making sure that just like their teams are supporting each other, and that it's open to talk about these things. And that's where I think that we have seen a big improvement, and then we can continue to make an improvement so these kids can continue to come out and be supportive. And then there will be more queer kids playing or gay kids playing, and then hopefully we'll see that at the next level.
I often, these are hard discussions to have sometimes, because I often think, okay, well, what can I do? And those are moments that I can do something, whether it be coaching my sons, whether it be being supporters to their teammates, whether it be somebody in my community that can make that difference. I also look at our society a little bit and I wonder, man, there's an elephant in the room here. You know what I mean? There's like a political side of this as well that trickles down into sports, whether it be like the trans legislation we've seen and banning. Colin, I know you're sort of a history buff. Not just a buff, educated. When you look at this time period and you think about the way that our society sees and treats LGBTQ people, and what stands out to you? How do you think we'll be remembered? What are our steps forward?
Ooh, well, I think we've seen a presidency in the past 4 years that was trying to eliminate a lot of the progress that we've made, and then I think in the short time of our new presidency, we're seeing some reversal of that. But with that said, we're still seeing all this anti-trans legislation that's happening in this year. So it's really hard it's hard to dissect it all. But I know that there's a lot of people that are on the right side trying to right those wrongs. And this anti-trans legislation to me is awful. I don't understand it. I don't understand where the root of it comes. It's almost like because of the new presidency that the people in these states are trying to take back more control and I don't know, try to make life harder for LGBTQ people when they can. I don't get it, but I don't know. That's a really hard question.
Yeah.
That's a hard question, but I mean,
I've hit you guys with some of those.
No,
right?
I mean,
that are big, and that's, I guess, what we're grappling with, right?
They're big. I mean, it's hard. It's hard when you bring in the historical aspect, like trying to analyze like trends in terms of like when certain progressive policies are being put out there, and then when there's bills and policies like these anti-trans ones that are being put out there with a president like Biden in control. So it's hard to say why these things happen, but I don't know. Robbie, do you want to step in here? Help me out.
No, I think you're, stating the facts. I find sports to be like such an interesting like microcosm of the world of the United States. It was like Colin Kaepernick was like taking a knee to, protest police brutality, and then you have different athletes coming out and I came out or at least was playing in 2013 when it was like the marriage equality stuff, during the Obama presidency. So it's so fascinating to kind of see how those two shadow each other. So I think, the United States would just like, we kind of just like slowly, it feels like slowly move in the right direction. And of course we have scars from the past, whether it's racism, again, sexism, homophobia, but I do feel like we're trending in the right direction. I think people are more aware of the wounds that people carry outside of sports and in sports, and trying to make changes. You also see that with the women's sports and equal pay and different aspects. So again, I think that we're all moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, it's slow, and there's steps that we take backwards when it's someone like Trump or these anti-trans bills. But overall, I think that the United States and sports here specifically is heading in the right direction. So I'm still optimistic. I'm still optimistic about the youth and hearing from them. One of the greatest things I think about like coming out and playing was definitely hearing from all the young high school athletes, college athletes, younger than that were just like out and doing their thing, and they weren't as affected as I was by being a closet athlete, and they kind of live openly. So, again, as I said, like it's kind of our youth that will lead us there. I think that's in sports, but also, as we talk about politics in our country, it seems like it's all kind of just slowly moving forward. Even when we have a step back, it feels like people kind of pick each other up and then make changes.
I'll end it with you guys here, and we've been going for a while, and just you've talked about the youth and people reaching out to you. I'm curious what you would say to listeners of this show, because we have a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds, whether it be age, whether it be gender, whatever it is, that listen to this. What would you tell kids that are maybe in the same situation that you were, who are wondering what they should do, how they should deal? Do you have advice? Is there something that you tell people? What would you say to them?
Personally, I try to tell people to pick one or two people that love you and that care about you, and when you're ready personally, open up to them and give them the chance to receive you for how you are. And hopefully, in most cases, they will. And if not, then just know that that's not a reflection of the person you are. And but most cases, and I can only speak for myself, that when you open up to the people that love you, they'll give you that love back. And then hopefully slowly you can try to expand that and feel acceptance in other places.
Yeah, my advice is somewhat similar, except the difference that I would have done when I was younger is probably find someone away from sports, probably away from my family that I could have, whether it was like a therapist or, someone at the Trevor Project or at Glisten or somewhere, to just kind of be able to put some words to all these things I was feeling. And that would help me, that could possibly help like guide me through these conversations I was about to have. I just think that could be important because a person like that or people like that, just to be able to like get those things, those words and those feelings outside of you and not just hold them all in. I think it's just a very healthy first step to, whether you're coming out to your family or your teammates or whatever, it's just good to kind of have a person to be able to, have this, it's not just an internal dialogue, right? You're expressing yourself and you're getting feedback from someone and they're helping you kind of make a plan of like, okay, how am I going to come out to all these people? I wish I would have done that. So that's like the only advice I think. I'm not one to give advice usually, but that's the one advice.
No, that's great advice, Robbie.
I think it's been great to hear from both of you. I know we've hit a lot and you've shared a lot. And I really thank both of you for that, for being here and for being honest with us and everybody listening. Thank you. I would just say.
Thank you, boys.
Thanks, Charlie.
Did you enjoy that? Was that right up your alley? Well, go subscribe to Extra Time wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also check the full shows on the MLS YouTube channel right over here, and you could subscribe to the MLS channel right here. Thanks for listening and watching, everybody.